Now to an update on a story we did back in November about a part of the country known as Cancer Alley. That's the 85-mile stretch of land between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, which has the highest risk of cancer from air pollution in the entire country. It's also home to more than 130 petrochemical plants and oil refineries, where many neighborhoods are at least 90% black. We went there just last fall, just as the new head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Michael Regan, launched his nationwide environmental justice tour, starting right there in Cancer Alley. People were skeptical of change and promises and said they wanted to see action. Well, now we have an update. The EPA has just announced a number of new actions dedicated to curbing pollution in communities of color, including there in Cancer Alley. So here are the details. For the first time, the EPA says it has now committed to unannounced inspections of suspected non-compliant facilities. So this is basically like pop-up visits to make sure things are running on track. They've also promised expanded air monitoring, including more air pollution inspectors. In addition, more than $600,000 in new air pollution monitoring equipment is now promised. So I sat down with EPA Administrator to really discuss these new commitments and find out what will change. Take a listen. Administrator Regan, thank you so much for making the time. I know that we caught up in the fall when you were on your justice tour, but the reality of it is we know that, this has been a problem, these high cancer rates and so-called Cancer Alley for generations. So, what took so long? Why do you think that only now we are finally beginning to see action on this front?
Morgan, the president made it a priority. It's a priority of the president and the vice president and this administration. These people have been ignored for far too long. These communities have suffered long enough. You were there on the ground with me in November, and you saw firsthand the fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers and children who are living in these industrial complexes so close to all of this pollution and all of these industrial practices. And so we're taking this very serious and we're taking action. And what EPA is doing is announcing a series of actions that we're taking to put our money where our mouths are.
When we talk about these actions, that's what those people on the ground that we interviewed in November, those you talked to in November, that is what they were all asking for, was action. And we know that one of the big obstacles to just even increase monitoring is sometimes the states themselves, because, a lot of jobs depend on these plants that are in these states. So what are you hearing from chemical plant owners? What are you hearing from the states themselves?
What we're hearing from the states and some of the chemical facilities is that they want to work with EPA. They know we're serious. All of the actions, Morgan, that we're taking are in direct response to what the community asked us to do. We are providing the states with additional resources so that there's no excuse, additional resources to put more monitoring in place so that we have real-time emissions data. I'm also leveraging assets that we have at EPA, aircraft, mobile vehicles that we use during times of emergency. When they're not being used for an emergency, we're going to deploy them so that we can get real-time data so that we can make informed decisions.
You talk about data, you talk about monitoring, we're talking about inspections, but what happens if those pollution levels are in fact exceeded? How is the EPA going to enforce these standards?
Well, Morgan, when we have the data in hand and we know that there are violations, we will enforce the law. And that law requires that these facilities curtail their emissions, that they put on more monitoring equipment. And if they cannot meet the law, then they are closed down until they can. I've talked with governors, I've talked with mayors, I've talked with facility owners as well. They know that those are the rules. And this enhanced monitoring, these enhanced inspections will keep them on their toes so that we don't see spikes, so that they are following the law to the T of the letter.
What does that enforcement look like? Is it a fine? Is it canceling the permits? What does that enforcement look like?
The enforcement looks like EPA putting boots on the ground, getting the information, the data, the management practices real time, and then levying a penalty, a fine, or shutting them down. We're going to do whatever we need to do to protect the community. And these businesses, this is not a matter of choosing between people and businesses. The businesses have the resources to invest in the pollution control technologies to curtail these emissions. They have a responsibility to be good neighbors, and we're going to hold them responsible for that.
You know, Administrator, I think if you remember, when we were on the ground, we were watching you launch this environmental justice store. One of the things we heard was so much skepticism, right? The people in these communities were saying, look, we've heard promises. We've heard that this was going to be fixed. And now it looks like they're seeing the beginnings of actual action to being taken. What's next then for you all? I mean, are there going to be more cities that are included in these, forthcoming environmental justice stores?
Well, first, Morgan, the business is unfinished in the Southeast where we took this tour. So we've got more that we want to do there. But yes, to your point, we will expand out, pilot some of these ideas, and look at a national approach. We'll also strengthen our expectations and our partnerships with our states. I was just on the phone with Mr. Taylor this morning from Louisiana, outstanding leader for his parish, talking about this very issue. It is because of Mr. Taylor. It is because of the actions that he and the community have taken that we've taken notice. And we're going to partner with Mr. Taylor's all across the nation to be sure that we get this right. We have an obligation to protect our communities, and this administration and this EPA, we will do that.
And a perfect segue. We're ready to talk to Mr. Taylor here in just a moment. Administrator Michael Regan, thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you taking the time to explain what's happening there on the ground.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.